Welcome to Other Lands Editing Podcast, where two speculative fiction writers and editors help you craft fantastical worlds by keeping an eye on exacting editing and foundational writing principles. Every 2 weeks, we bring you interviews with other writers, advice on editing and writers' craft pitfalls, and reviews of popular media to help you grow. So sit back, relax, and join Margaret Bates and Midnight Boss as we discuss all things writing and editing. Hi, welcome back to the Other Lands Editing Podcast. This is Margaret. It's been a while. In the interim, we did some things, including finishing out the school semester, getting married, easy stuff. But we're back for season 2, and we'll be talking about books and writing and craft. But this is a sort of shorter episode because we got invited to and able to attend an influencer night event for local Maryland book community influencers at Queen Takes Book, which is an independently owned and operated bookshop that's about a year old now. It's had its 1 year birthday in Columbia, Maryland, and it was a really cute night. We got to get to see the store and meet a lot of the staff and the owners and meet other like-minded book creators and bookstagram people and people who work with the library system, and it was really neat. Midnight, say hi.
Hi.
Since we went to the event, I guess my first question is what were your impressions of the store and just going there? Because you had never been. I've been a couple times before this, but I don't think you had ever gone.
Yeah, I hadn't been there before. I think my first impression was probably what you would feel when you go into most small bookstores is that when you're in the bigger bookstores, there's a lot of noise, not actual noise, but just a lot of stuff and a lot of clutter and distraction. And the benefit of a small bookstore like this, and I'll specify with some things, is that it helps you focus and find things. Of it feels like, oh, here's just everything. Good luck. It was nice some of the things that they had there that made it feel really personalized and pulled together of a lot of places will have staff recommendations these days, but they're not always like as specific as I find with the type that they had. So they only have a couple of staff there. So they're okay, Tori recommended this and it has X, Y, and Z. And I wrote down a couple of the books that they'd recommended. So that was really useful to me as a reader. I also appreciated the subgenres that they put in there. Now, I'm not a big dark romance fan, but I think it's neat that they had a section specifically for that, separated from the regular contemporary romance. While it wasn't a big section, I liked that there was separated out the fantasy. And I appreciated that Gideon the Ninth and that whole series is actually on their bookshelves. I might go back and pick them up because the second one's kind of hard for me to read. That was nice to see as a reader because you're going into the bookstore to find things. And because it was this kind of event, we weren't really asking them questions of, I want to look for this or that. But I feel like they would be able to find that. Another thing that I noticed, and this comes because I worked for an independent creator for a little while, I noticed that the non-book items were more curated from independent creators. And when we talked to the owner, she did say that they had a place called Fair Market where they had sourced some of these things. So we're talking about candles from small creators, book-ish goods under that marketing term, which includes pencils, quills, some art sets, the cards, of course, like the specialty, like this was made by an independent person card instead of Hallmark, some cute stickers and things like
Really cute
that.
stickers.
Yes, they're really that's what I noticed that was really neat. They had some games, which is not going to be independently sourced that way, but the games were cool. They had a whole little section with the quills, with the open, empty journals with the detailing on front. And I feel like that's something that you get for somebody who knows how to write. And they sit on their shelf looking beautiful. They don't use them, but it's very pretty and cute. So also most of the candles smell good.
Yeah, I will say that I've been there a couple times before tonight. Or that night, I had stopped in before Christmas and picked up a queer Christmas romance. but also a book candle. I think it was lavender scented maybe, but it was one of the ones I got you for Christmas. So I knew they had nice
It's
candles.
next to me called Book Lover, lavender, lemon, and jasmine.
Yeah, there you go. And actually, at the event, I picked up a book, and I'll talk about what it was later, but picked up two of those more ethically sourced stickers for your laptop from the fair market. And one is a little raccoon poking out of a trash can, says there's no trash can, only, or trash can, only trash can. And one that's the Grim Reaper that just says Slay underneath it. So they were really cute. Full disclosure, I guess I worked at a local bookshop for a while this spring. I also have carpal tunnel, so that didn't last long term. So I see bookshops slightly differently because I had to spend time doing the orders and towards the end of my run there, like doing the merchandising and displays and seeing what they have as compares to other indie shops or what I know would be or had been leading up to this season on demand when you looked at Ingram Sparks or the New York Times lists and things like that. So what I noticed is something that also Midnight picked up on, even though she's not necessarily a romance fan, is that they had for, not a huge amount of square footage, but like a good romance section as far as they had the shelves, a mix of what's current with contemporary and other romances. But then they had a shelf to the left was really the romances that had come out basically this summer or newer ones, or ones that were either newer or tied into their Thursday once a month romance book club. Like they had the relationship mechanic display, and that was their June book, and then their own dark romance section. So all those kind of staples, which fit because they also invited at least one creator who was like her whole ethos is dark romance specifically. So they also curated for that. And now, again, as a book person who used to work in bookselling, I noticed they actually had a pretty decent for a smaller shop, like four. So it's like a section of four shelves on top of each other for graphic novels. Not nearly as big as I assume you'd get like what few giant corporation stores are left. Like I assume if you went to Barnes and Noble, they'd have more graphic novels. But working in other bookshops or having been to other ones that are some indie ones in Baltimore for school readings, I did think that they had a pretty good graphic novel section as far as they had some newer ones from Alison Bechdel. They had the Olympus lore one that people really love so much. They had Mouse, so they had that, and some other ones that are just not necessarily as heavy as thematically as Mouse, but other ones as well. They also did a pretty good job, honestly, of curating horror because I can tell one of their staff is definitely a horror fan specifically, not just because a lot of times in stores you have a general thriller and mystery. And if a horror book comes up, then good for it, but not usually a priority or one where you have that. Or, hey, we got some Stephen Kings, which they did have, of course, but they did have that effort where they have a whole mystery section that's one shelf, but they had a shelf that had like horror and thriller that all curated in the horror as well. And some stuff that was newer and some things that I've been meaning to read, just haven't, like Stephen Graham Jones. There's the one that's that body horror I desperately want to read that's by the South American author that's kind of like a cannibalism thing, but I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But and they also say that their horror curation's pretty decent because they also have in their nonfiction section a book that they had prominently displayed that's a review of horror movies you should watch in the last 40 years, which I leafed through. So there's some love for that. I also thought that their young adult middle grade section was pretty thorough and had a range of books. Like it was also, even though they have a whole display that is staff based of like these are just our staff recs, if you go into certain sections, like the fiction, like the romance, and like some of the books in just the general middle grade and A section, they'll have those little hand done index cards under a book they particularly liked within YA to recommend it. So I really felt that hand done touch of, hey, it's not technically our rec section, but you really need to not miss this book was really cool. And then I also appreciated two other sections. Their kids section, which is good. It has a mix of more current picture books and things that are out, had some of your classics like Where the Wild Things Are, but then I noticed they still had displays of picture books that were more, I guess, social justice based. Even though it wasn't technically the month for that anymore. So they had one that was called like Queer and Fearless. It's a picture book, obviously, to get maybe kids who are towards the end of primary school, like fourth or fifth grade, into that idea and learning about queer history. They had one about like this day in June and another one called Juneteenth to get people, especially I assume young black kids, into understanding the holiday. And it's the middle of July, but they're still, no, we're going to have these out there. I think that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's like, okay, well, you get your month or your week and it's over, but no, it's something that's present and that they are curating these books just to be around for people whenever they come.
Yeah, and that goes with some of the books they had on display about here's a list of banned books you should read, or a couple books towards their nonfiction section about how do you support local creators and how to avoid always shopping at Amazon. So again, something that seems to be in their ethos, which I definitely support as someone who wants to support local and smaller creators. And then they have a good size like local author section. It's a little display by their stickers. It has a mix of authors who are independently published and then local authors who are also because we're honestly in the DC, Baltimore area, so you get a good set of authors because of the size of the cities who are traditionally published as well, of course. It's not like we're in nowhere in Kansas or something. So like Mona Shroff, who does a lot of multi-generation Indian family things, a lot of Indian-based romance because she's an Indian author, other types of authors who are they're traditionally published, but also books that were very specific to not just Maryland, but like the county. Like some that were like, here are hiking trails that you should know in this county, or here is the haunted history of Baltimore. So I appreciate they tried to also have a section of books that were both for the local authors to show off or to be part of that ecosystem, but also to be like, hey, do you want to look to do something in your own backyard? Which I think is really important too. That kind of stuff, which sounds sometimes cheesy, but I feel it's not because it's a nice way to build community and build a way for people to appreciate maybe hidden gems or attractions in their own county or city that they hadn't thought about before. I think that's pretty cool. So and then I think after that, it was a loose sort of gathering, which I appreciate in a way because it gave us a chance to talk to other creators and not feel like there was like a Q&A or there was like you must meet this hoop to jump through and allowed us and a lot of us are shyer people actually in real life just go, hey, I want to talk to you, I want to get to know your story and see what you're doing in the bookish community in Annapolis and the Anne Arundel County and Howard County areas. But we did get to hear a little bit of the opening spiel from the staff. And in this case, it was Tim, who's the owner, Katie's husband. And he has a day job, also in PR, but he's sort of working on ways to get Queen Takes book more involved with local book influencers, more in that social media side of things. So he explained this is why we're here. It's a free form format. There's no right answers kind of thing. Just, what do you look for when you, I guess, do content as content creators, or in our case, kind of podcasters who snuck in? And then what sort of things would you think would be cool events going forward? And then again, a lot of letting us take the reins and talk to the store representatives who were there and the store staff, as well as the other creators. So it was low pressure and low key, but I think that's really good for a first event because you're starting to even build those networks at all. And I really appreciated that approach to it. And we ended up talking with both Katie, the owner, for a bit, and with Tori, who has been a bookseller there since winter, since around Christmas time, and recently got promoted to being their events manager. Do you want to talk a little bit about that part too?
Well, we talked about the upcoming Where's Waldo initiative.
Yeah, totally. Where's Waldo is literally like if you remember that book from when we were kids, Where's Waldo in his little striped shirt. And this case is, I guess, Where's Waldo meets that thing from about a decade ago, Flat Stanley, where they actually have a physical paper printout of a Where's Waldo who's maybe like 6 or 7 inches tall, I assume, because you can hide it in your store. So not a full cutout standing kind of thing. And so other Columbia businesses, so not necessarily other bookstores, because there's only so many in the Columbia area. I think there's a second one that's like a used bookshop. But other mom and pop like coffee shops, or they're right next door to the bird watching center. So maybe they're involved with it. But like other local shops in Columbia are teaming up to be like, come to our store. Here's our little sheet. It marks you off if you found Waldo successfully. You collect the signature of the store owners who respectively say, oh, yeah, you came into our store at the bird watching center at Queen Takes book and you found Waldo. And then at the end on August 2nd, they are all going to have like a Where's Waldo party at Queen Takes book where you show your little essentially passport. I mean, it looks like it's a layout like a calendar, but you have to say that, oh, I found Waldo at these places and you're eligible to get prizes and celebrate Waldo. I thought it was a really cute idea because it's creating an alliance of other shops that aren't necessarily even bookshops, but just are Columbia locally owned.
Yeah, and that was one thing that Katie said that she wanted to do with the bookstores. One of the reasons that she opened it is supportive of local community, and it enables that. I think we also have talked about how the small bookstores, one of the ways that they survive is being glued into the community like that. They also have a lot of different book clubs. So they have their own romance book club, but they have a nonfiction book club. They have the middle grade book club. They have multiple, it's many. So when we put up this, we will also have a website where we can link to all the book clubs that they have available. And also they have some author readings as well, which you would expect. So those things are ongoing and upcoming, and they're looking to expand to different types of events.
Yeah, and I think some of the other ones, because I took a literal picture of their sandwich board with what they have upcoming for the month. So they've also got like mystery, which is good because a lot of people love mystery books as a whole. One that's just like a general reader's cup reading kind of challenge club. Then they've done a deep dive about Sierra Simone is a writer who does darker romances, but they've done like 6 months of reading one of her most popular series. So I'm also curious to see eventually if that works for them, if they'll do other for a few months deep read an author who's popular in one of their more popular series, which I think is really cool because sometimes with book clubs, you hop in and you hop out, and because they're like a genre, you get whatever's within that genre for the month. But I think it's neat to have an option where you can do a deeper reading. But they are definitely a place that, as Katie, the owner, was explaining, we're trying to figure out the best way to use their footprint of their store to have community-based events like reading groups and Waldo parties, and I'm sure other things as they come up, which is pretty cool. And I thought it was interesting that she'd worked previously in like nonprofit management. And then I know when our husband was sort of introducing the hi, welcome to the Creator Night store, it was sort of post-pandemic. They were looking for a change of things and figuring out how to make the store work and getting it open and the business plan. And I think one thing that came across with both her and Tori when we spoke to them was that they really do take the curation seriously. And Katie mentioned trying to find that balance between what they, as readers and book lovers, want to put in the store and what they know is something that like is a niche or a genre that people are really reading and that also would obviously be financially good for the store. Those like first year getting through that balance of how do you curate for the general audience, but also for your taste and what you want to see in a bookshop and just learning that process. But I got from both of them just the excitement of also just when someone comes into the store and says, I'm looking for my friend, I'm looking for my grandpa, I'm looking for me, what do I find? And just the excitement of being able to find the right book recommendation for them and making that connection. Because I think that's something that goes back to your point about how it struck you as a reader coming in as different than something like a Books a Million or a Barnes and Noble, where it's a lot of noise, a lot of stuff going on, and maybe the books that are being recommended are the ones that are trying to push for the week based on what they've got in back order, as opposed to people who really know this and really care about it and want to not just share reading with you, but find the right book for you or for your family member you might be shopping for.
Yeah.
So there's a general excitement in that, which I think is pretty infectious, and I really appreciated as well. Infectious in a good way. As part of the night, obviously, because we weren't the only content creators there. We just happened to be, I guess, the only podcasters, which is a generous term for us, but we're getting through those ropes. We've got episodes. But we met a bunch of different sort of Instagram and other types of book influencers or people who are in the reading community, and we ended up following a bunch of them on Instagram. So that's cool. So when you see some of our posts and things, you'll see at least the ones that were from the Queen Takes Book Night. We will have like links, or some of them will like hearted and that kind of thing. So a lot of tagging shall commence. But I was going to go through some of the ones we did meet and mentioning their handles as a building of community, which was really the spirit of the night to begin with. So the first person I met and talked to one on one was Michelle Moore, who goes under the handle T Michelle Moore, and she's a photographer, sort of thing she picked up as a hobby in the last few years and something she's really like started to truly love. Now that she's retiring from her day job, she's really getting into doing that and seeing where using that passion as something to have both income and retirement and just something she can do and be part of what she wants to do going forward as she changes careers. And her Instagram handle has some really gorgeous photos. She does a lot of black and white shots of DC, some of the tourist areas there, but also she's a really cool one. If you're a local Baltimorean, you'll get it, of the old style sign of the Domino Sugar sign. We all know it if you've got up 695 before, but she's a really great black and white shot of that. One of the other persons we met is called the Lewd Nerd. That's her handle. She's a really great card. It's got like the neon green writing on it, very well branded. She also
It's one
her
of the only
goes
people
by
who remember to bring their cards.
yeah. She's like, I used to just tell people how to look me up on LinkedIn, but it got boring. I was like, so you reverse created the card. I like it. But she works also for BlurredCon, which is like the Black Nerd Con Blurred. And so she was very savvy and she came up with like tag posting ideas, which we're getting all the pictures in for that. And as far as the group chat goes, they should be up on Tuesday or Wednesday to see all our merry-go-round of recommendations and books we always rec. She, again, her business card was very cool, and her Instagram is really neat because it also doesn't just promote for BlurredCon or for books she likes, but she also will tag and promote other influencers she's familiar with, including a couple of really awesome cosplayers. So if you want to see really cool cosplay pics, she's always recommending and relinking those. And then her things that she really loves, Kennedy Ryan is an author. So one of her big recs that you'll see on Tuesday is a really good Kennedy Ryan book she loves. One of the next people we met was Anna the Book Bestie, who also is a big part of the Queen Takes book community because she is someone who helps organize and run their monthly Thursday romance readers night. And she's also one of the people chairing and running the Simone book club and going through that back list of some of her more popular series. Although she said, even though it's not on the list, she does want to eventually get to reading Simone's book Priest, which sounds fun because who doesn't like the fallen man of the cloth? If Fleabag's any indication, most people like that. We also met, and you probably do remember this time, Starfire Book Girl, because I remember her being like, "Well, I didn't name myself after DC Comics," or like,
Yeah, we were talking with her and Lizette.
yeah. And I thought it was fun because, like, I guess technically, because you said that Starfire's been around probably longer than we associate
Yeah.
with just like the Teen Titans cartoon show, but she wasn't famous really for like general audiences until probably the early 2000s with that show. And so she is definitely someone who is a romance reader, and especially with someone who could point to the dark romance shelf and say, I like this one, and I am reading Butcher and Blackbird, and I like Lights Out. And I was like, I feel like Lights Out might be Mafia. Like the book jacket didn't confirm. She's like, yeah, at the end it is, and the rest of them are. I knew it because like the heroine's surname is Italian, and it goes that way eventually. You think Italian. Mafia, for good or ill, midnight. So she's very knowledgeable about the dark romance side of things. And then, yeah, Lisette, who I thought was really interesting because she also works for an organization in Montgomery County that helps encourage reading among children. Like Israelis thinking about how to get children more into books. So she had just come back from Philly and ALA, American Library Association conference, was just trying to organize all the arcs she got. And I enjoyed the conversation with her because she also, to be fair, like I was like, I read certain things more than others, but I try and read widely. And so some of the arcs she had gotten, I think, were even like nonfiction type books that were for kid age and middle grade and young adult age that she was also trying to figure out how to fit into her reading schedule. And she is also a huge fan of mysteries. She brought both her husband with her, who also picked out books he liked, including the latest Grady Hendrix, The Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. I like Grady Hendrix, so big approve, but also her book buddy, Buddy the bear, who also had some recommendations as he sort of went around and was photographed as, the reading teddy bear. But she likes mystery, so she's also talked about the struggles of, or the pleasures, I suppose, of, yeah, you read mysteries, but not getting into like a cozy mystery alley where you're not also reading more traditional things or things that are more style of an Agatha Christie type and trying to read widely even within one genre, let alone across genres to be better able to make plans and figure out how to encourage reading in younger generations. And then we also met Jenna Reading, Jenna with a G, which, made me think of Midnight because one of her actual name is one of those types of like, it's not spelled the way you think it is necessarily, or the G gets like, ignored more. And she's also another type of romance reader, but also someone who enjoys fantasy and horror. So I know that you and Jenna a little bit geeked out on like fantasy books. And then she also, and I geeked out on horror because she's been confirming what I've seen all over the place that Stephen Graham Jones, The Buffalo Hunter is like not just excellent horror, but his best book, which is pretty exciting. I just need to clear my schedule to get that into my reading life. And then also, even though I didn't get to speak with her directly, she did end up following me from some of the shared photos already and tag around, which is Chloe the Reader. And I really appreciated that already her book feed didn't just have the stuff from Queen Takes book on a Friday night, but she'd also gone the next day to the Bowie Big based Prince George's County Book Festival, the Right Women Book Festival to support local women and non binary. and trans femme like authors in the area. So Chloe the Reader is definitely out there supporting local writers in Maryland, and I thought that was really cool of her. So we met a lot of cool people, and then we post some of our stuff on our Instagram that Midnight's been good at setting up this weekend with some hurdles and a lot of good-natured stick-to-itiveness, then you'll get to see some of them mentioned in our repost and get to see again the sort of carousel on Tuesday or Wednesday of the books they always recommend. And then I think in a week or so, the books that are newer, that are sort of their new since spring recommendations as well. I guess that summarizes most of the night. I know that going forward, we are going to work with in August an interview directly with Katie and Tori or whoever wants to be the representative from the store, talk about more in depth. I hope to, because it is, I think, on a weekend, I think the second's a Saturday, maybe go see the Walder Night and see how it works out and what prizes people ended up winning. I know, Minna, you've been working also just for general for other lands on like a list this morning of different types of things. Do you want to talk about sort of the research you've been doing into some of the bookshops in Maryland, just briefly?
Oh Lord, I don't have enough research to really talk about it, but I was trying to find out how many small bookstores we had in our general area. A lot of them are in Baltimore, which is maybe a couple of day trips instead of like jaunts up there. But we're looking at, so I was surprised to find that there's a traveling bookstore in Arnold. So we have that as well as Park Books and Lit Lab. There's the Backwater Books in Ellicott City. There are a couple of used bookstores around. Then Fox Books, which is pretty close. We could probably jaunt over there in an afternoon. I'm not sure what the events are that we might be going to, but I think that we would probably plan that out if we could align with an event that they're doing, then great. Otherwise, like maybe month by month, checking out some of the local book scene and seeing if we what connections we can make across the area. Because as you mentioned before, there's a decent amount. When I was living in Houston, there had this whole little book alley. Like they had specialty bookstores where you would have, okay, I believe it was called Murder by the Book, and it was just mysteries and suspense. You had it that narrowed, but we do have a lot of smaller bookstores and they all have their little ethos.
Yeah, and I think also in my brain, because it is the way that Maryland is, it just becomes this melange of there's Baltimore on one side, and eventually, if you go far enough, DC, and that bleeds into Northern Virginia. Not that I like to day trip to Northern Virginia all that much because 495 is Satan, but there are a couple of cute indie stores there. There was one in Fairfax I did like and poked in a few times. And I am eventually curious. It'll have to be sometime early on a Saturday to avoid a million people on 495. It's a running theme. I just despise it. But they do have that new romance bookshop that's only romance in Alexandria that one day I do want to look at. And I know that I think you had found online one called Atomic Books, which I feel isn't
Yeah,
necessarily just comic books, but is more like genre based for sure. So you do have some of that where some of the indie shops in sort of the greater Maryland, DC, Baltimore area have their own vibe, but a lot of them are more general bookshops and they are, we only do this one thing. I think it's just
yeah.
Houston's
Atomic
a
Books
bigger city for that, I
isn't
think.
just comic books at all. Um,
No, it's not.
yeah, but it's you might think that because of Atomic Comics, but it's a wider bookstore. But they do have some comic books, and then there's the I don't have a single word for the kind of events that they're having, but they're
Yeah, they have
focused
some different
focused
ones.
book groups around particular things and commemorating John Waters.
Yeah, I did look at their site when you showed it to me, which was like events, and they had like an anti-romance book club. Basically, because people had asked them if they ever had that wasn't a genre they technically carry. They're reading things this year like Night Beast and a couple of other ones. But I saw them, oh, that's interesting. It's like a book to read.
Night Beast, Night Bitch.
Yeah, Night Bitch, that's it. So sorry, but some interesting
They're also going to
choices.
read Ice Planet Barbarians, and this is how you lose the Time War. So
Yeah, yeah. So
it's
they
called
got a
Bad Love.
melange. Yeah, totally. So yeah, there's a lot of different things, and we'll hopefully be able to go to different bookshops. Or I think there's two takeaways from Queen Takes Book is A, I appreciate again any place that's going to be independent, locally owned, try not to just boost up themselves, but other Columbia businesses and other creators, like with the fair market and those sticker and candle creators and those community touchstones. And like Katie was saying, do more events and do more to be a third space for the community. But I also think that just going there and meeting other creators and meeting other people who are passionate about books in Maryland in general made us more interested in checking out other small businesses, small places that are also book centric and giving the support to them. So that's something hopefully we'll be able to do bit by bit and put up on the Insta or other things going forward. For now, thank you for checking in with us. We're happy to be back after a long summer and spring and doing more content. Soon we'll be talking about, honestly, we saw Superman, so we have thoughts on that as a writer perspective, especially since we compare it to having recently mostly rewatched, so we kind of fell asleep, Man of Steel. And then in August, we'll be able to coordinate and get that interview, hopefully everything with Queen Takes Books staff up as well. Just new things coming out as we explore season 2 of Other Lands editing. Thank you for sitting with us and thank you for coming back. Anything you want to add before I turn us off midnight?
Nope.
All right. Well, we'll see y'all next time. Thank you for joining the Otherlands Editing Podcast. Look for our next episode coming soon. And in the interim, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you want more information or want to connect, you can find Margaret Bates and Midnight Voss at our site, Otherlands Editing. Until next time, keep writing and keep refining your words.